Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, your paranormal portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by the supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together.
Welcome in, everybody. And boy, if you knew the behind the scenes on this one, you'd be laughing. We're all laughing. We've had so many technical difficulties. Apparently, when you get three people like myself and Steve and Kevin together, the spirits are having a party in the behind the curtain, so to speak. So we are here tonight to take a walk through the gate with two of the most wonderful people that I know. And we're going to speak tonight on Civil War ghosts. And I've brought in tonight Mr. Steve Stockton. Steve, say hi.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Cisco.
Oh, thank you so much. Steve, as you all know, is a wonderful author. He's into so many things. It would take up the whole show to tell you them all, but I'll tell you right now, check out 13 Past Midnight, his fantastic YouTube channel. And it's Missing Persons and Mysteries, is it not?
Yeah, that's the other channel. We just passed our 50,000 subscriber mark, so having a lot of fun over there.
Yes, and it's fantastic. And you also got your books on Amazon and out in print, and now actually in audiobook as well. So absolutely check those out. Right, Steve?
Yep, Strange Things in the Woods and My Strange World. They're on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and wherever fine books are sold. That's what my publisher told me to say. So.
Fantastic. And I had that my next guest on an episode a couple back, and I absolutely fell in love with him. When I read his book, I absolutely knew he was a kindred spirit. And I have on as my next guest Mr. Kevin Killen of Ghosts and Me. Fantastic. Say hi, Kevin.
Thank you, Cisco, for having me, and hello to everyone. It's good to be back.
It's wonderful. And we just thought that the three of us together talking about one subject that we just near and dear to our hearts is Civil War ghosts and battlefields and everything that goes with it, and the fantastical historical stories, the aspect of the history of it, as well as the mournful sorrow of it all. And I asked everybody to come together tonight, bring us some of their favorites, their favorite stories, and a little bit of history and a little bit of scary boo. So we're going to have a good time. To each of you, I know you have some great stories and reasons that you love history, and I thought tonight we could start a little bit and say, why Civil War battlefields? Is it what's a little bit different about it all for you, Steve?
Well, that's hard to say, but there is definitely something there in Civil War battlefields that is not as evident to me in other battlefields. I've been Revolutionary War battlefields in New England. I've visited World War I and World War II battlefields in Europe, and even went to Vietnam and visited some of those battlegrounds in the early 2000s, and they've all got that feel, that pall over them, but there's just something about the Civil War battlefields. It's a little bit darker, a little bit different. And I think mainly it was because it was the first times that literally brother against brother. I had folks on both sides in the war, and it was the first time that Americans were killing each other on American soil, and I think that added to it. That and just the sheer number of deaths in some of these places.
Absolutely, I totally agree. How about you, Kevin? Why is it so near and dear to your heart, do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree with a lot of the stuff that Steve just said. Also, with me, I actually in the first in Ghosts and Me, I actually had a few experiences on a battlefield. So, basically trying to find out what that was, why that was, things like that. Whether it's residual or whatever. But the battlefield that I've been to before I even started working on my new project, which is Battlefield Ghosts, there was always an energy that I felt going to these battlefields and just walking around and reading the markers and just taking it all in. So I think there's just an energy energy I don't feel anywhere else that I've felt at battlefields.
Yeah, I have to agree with both of you completely. There's just something about it, and often Steve and I have talked about this and said, what was it? Was it it can't just be the sheer numbers of death, although I know that kind of energy dispersed all at once like that, of course, in any battlefield. But with me, it just seems that the Civil War is so sad to have people on, of the same country on their soil fighting against each other to such a degree. And I have a little excerpt from the book that Steve and I did. We Are All Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife, A Guided Tour Through a Haunted Life. And I've had my own experiences on battlefields. And my very first experience that I can really remember clearly that wasn't fragmented or could be explained away was with a soldier. He wasn't Civil War, but he was a Revolutionary War soldier. And I think that's one of the things that sparked me, because he was also the first one where I really could tell that I could feel him before he got there. I could feel the sadness if he was very sad and just lost and desperate. And I could feel the anger and the just help me kind of rage that sometimes he popped up with too. And I felt the same on the battlefield, some at the same time. And it's just something that's it just touches my heart and knocks the wind out of me sometimes. But this is an excerpt from Who Could Love Me? A couple of my experiences in Gettysburg. And it says here, they were fathers, sons, husbands, and sweethearts. They were from a Victorian time set in Protestant, Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, and Jewish standpoints for the most part. A simple black and white look at a religious standpoint, good was good, bad was bad, and most assuredly punished. Honor was honor, duty something you held in high regard. They were simple and hardworking and complex at the same time. If they were lucky enough to have a uniform issued to them, they wore wool jackets and pants, linen shirts and leather shoes without benefit of socks. When the average heat of those 3 days in July and throughout the Civil War, extreme heat, extreme cold, and that day in July in Gettysburg was 86 degrees. They marched for days on rations of hardtack, dried beans, and coffee if they were fortunate. Some rations confiscated from towns along the way helped, but for the most part, starvation rations were the normal here. The sheer intestinal fortitude and fight of the soldiers on both sides was staggering. The will to drive on in these weary warriors was second to none, as shown in the charge up Little Round Top, across the fields of Fredericksburg, Antietam, Shiloh, and on and on. They were fathers, sons, husbands, and sweethearts. They were people. And I think that's something that I've always tried to remember. Ghosts were people too. And I think that's some of the things that intrigues us and some of the things that really scare us to our very core, and unites us in some way, because we all know that eventually we're all going to pass. What's on the other side? And I think some of these ghosts come back maybe because they don't want to be forgotten, or they need a little help to understand what's going on. And that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight. So, that being said, who wants to open up with a ghost story? It's so sad, and then, you got to add a little humor to it, because we all love them. We love them so, the stories. We love to be scared. So, Kevin, since you're our guest tonight, would you like to open up with a little bit?
Sure. Actually, it's more of a, well, I definitely believe it's spirit related. I have to, and I thought it was great. I'm working, my current project is called Battlefield Ghosts. I'm working on, and it's going to be a book that I'm investigating 4 different battlefields right now, Antietam and Gettysburg included. But I started with Ball's Bluff, which is in Loudoun County, Virginia, which isn't too far from where I'm at in Alexandria. Never been there before. It's a beautiful place. A lot of energy. There's a lot of, I could feel people following me through the woods. I mean, there was definitely noise in there. I know that they were there. There was a lot of energy there. Unfortunately, I didn't capture anything on my camera or EVP wise, but as I got into my vehicle to leave and turned the vehicle on, I usually have a radio station on, like most people do. They were playing Billy Idol's Rebel Yell. So I took that as the South saying, hey, we appreciate you being here. And they did talk to me. That was them talking to me. And I just sat there and laughed. And I said, thank you so much. I get the message. And people probably thinking I'm crazy walking by my car saying, what's wrong with this guy? But to me, it was a definite message, and it was great. So that was kind of my indoctrination for the new book, and I thought that was great. That while they didn't put anything really on film or EVP, they sure got me with the message with the songs. So I've done this long enough to know that people might say, it's a coincidence, whatever. Well, maybe so, but I know that the spirits do have their way of letting us know when they want us to do something. So that's just kind of the kind of precursor, I guess, to this whole thing. So I'm really excited about finishing up the investigations and finishing the book.
It is amazing how they find ways to reach out. And like you said, a lot of people would say that, that was a coincidence, Rebel Yell, Well, first of all, the song is 25 years old or so?
Yeah.
And then, the fact that, that they were famous for the Rebel Yell. They did that to scare the heck out of the other side, and it worked. Pardon me. But amazing. Steve, do you have one?
Oh, gosh, I don't even know where to start. The thing about the song, though, that did remind me of one of your stories, though, Cisco, about the person that got punched in the stomach by an invisible entity for whistling Dixie on the wrong side of the battlefield.
Absolutely.
You know the one I'm talking about? I'll get you to tell that one.
Sure. It was, that one was in Gettysburg, and a lot of my stories are, and I'll tell you why. I've been there so many times, and it struck me so, about 3 hours away from there, and I'm so drawn to it. But yes, they were on one of the scheduled ghost tours, and they were out on, I think it was the Peach Orchard. And the guide had warned everybody, now look, provoking, and often they'll tell you that, don't provoke here. These are soldiers you're talking to, and you're not going to get a good response. You may get a response, but might not be glad about it. In fact, one of the places I went, one of the guides I was talking to told us that the night before, a woman got slapped right across the face. So this guy goes in, and he's just trying to get something on the EVP, and he's asking him questions like, what was the war like? Like, it's a silly question, and just being impertinent. And what's it feel like to get shot? And just, by then I'm sure they about had enough. And maybe he got his answer because he decided he was going to stand on one of the strongholds of where the Union soldiers had been, pretty much dug in for 2 days, and started whistling Dixie. He said, I'll get a response out of you. And he starts Winn-Dixie. And I guess about the second the second round, he just all of a sudden balled over and just and he felt like he got punched in the stomach, and I do mean hard. And that was about all you heard out of that young man that night, because that scared the pants just about off of him. He got his evidence.
I love that story. I just wanted to point out, you said the song by Billy Idol, Rebel Yell, was about 25 years old. Try 37 years old. Can you believe that? Came out in 1983. That makes me feel old.
Wow. Coincidence. But I've had that, and I've often talked about on this show that, if you're thinking of someone, like say you're thinking about your sister who passed, and like, man, thinking about her and connecting into that love energy, I believe, you're connecting into that energy, and you're thinking of them, and they connect into you. And in some way, they're going to find some way to let you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the moment, they leave a feather in a spot, that you wouldn't normally find a feather, or a penny, pennies from heaven, or, a song will come on the radio. That was their favorite song.
And what better way to welcome you to a Civil War battlefield than Rebel Yell?
There you go. I mean, and that's cool though, because not only do they know how, I can't explain how they do it. They can. We all know. We've all this week have found out that they can definitely affect electronics. But I've actually sat in my car at a really hard time I was having. I was helping somebody that I dearly loved, and they were in a lot of trouble. And I sat in my car before I got out, because once I drove to the place I needed to go, I was going into a health food and herbal store for a cure for what was going on with them. And I said, I'm not really sure what I'm going in here to get, but I need to, if at all possible, I was talking to my spirit guides and anybody who would listen, in a car all by myself. And I said, if there's somebody that is in here who will understand what I need, what this person needs, I need to speak to that person. If you'd be so kind to help me find that person, if there's somebody here like that. And I remember at the very end of it, I asked my mom, who's passed since 1976. And I said, Mom, I need you. I could use some help. And then I felt a little bit better, and I got out of the car, and I go walking in, and in the store. And as I opened the door, you look around, and you get used to the atmosphere you're walking in, right? And I'm looking around to see who's there and who might be able to help me. And the song changes on the loop, the Muzak or whatever you call it, that plays in the store. And it happened to be her favorite song. Now, this is a song, it's called Alone Again Naturally by Gilbert, I forget his name.
Oh, Sullivan,
yeah.
There you go. And that's something you don't hear very often, and especially on a Muzak loop. And I was like, thanks, Mom. And as soon as I said that, as I was walking down the aisles, I passed the aisle, and something said, take 2 steps back, that's him. And I looked down the aisle, and this kid that was stocking, had his back to me and bent over putting, something on the shelves. And at the same time, he just turned around and looked at me like he was almost tapped on the shoulder by somebody, like, she needs help. And he just looked at me, and I smiled, and I said, thanks again. And I went, and sure enough, he knew exactly what I needed. So, yes, they can do that. I just thought enjoy that, Kevin, because I know and they know we know, and that's why they do it, because we're going to pay attention, and the more you pay attention to these things, the more they do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It took me a long time to learn that, though. I think I put that in my first book, is that it took me a long time to understand with the empathic way that I am now, and the spirit guides and everything, that I wasn't listening. And things were happening to me that, something would happen here. I'd think about something. And my biggest, one of my favorite telling is when I was in college, I had a friend of mine, and we were driving around somewhere, and I happened to glance down at his little digital clock in his car, and it was like 3:33. So something just popped in my head. Oh, that'd make a cool lottery number. And he was like, yeah, we should probably play that, joking around. Well, damned if the thing didn't hit the next day.
Wow.
So that's kind of where it started, and then I'd start hearing things like you said. I would think about a person I haven't thought of in a long time. They'd call me,
Yep.
or I think of a song that was an obscure song, and it would be on the radio or that artist or something. And then all these things kept happening. I was like, "What is going on here?" So it was things like that. But it finally was almost they had to smack me in the head for me to say, "Hey, listen and see what we're doing." So when I heard that at the battlefield, I knew exactly what that was, and I thanked them and started laughing because I knew exactly what they were, and thanked them for saying, "Hey," they knew I was here. They acknowledged it in their own way, and that's how I took it. So yeah, the spirit world's great.
It is. It's absolutely wonderful. And as you're talking about, it takes you a long time to realize, and something popped into my head too. I've told this often about. I've been to many powwows. I'm Native American, and I've been to many powwows. And my favorite thing is, it's great during the day, and it's great dancing in the sacred circle, and it's great doing the rabbit dance and listening to the drummers and all the beautiful songs. I'll tell you, I'm dancing before I get out of the car, because the minute my feet, I call it like my DNA memory starts hearing those drums, my feet are tapping. I'm going. They're already like, get out there and dance, get out there. It's almost like your ancestors are dancing with you, and I believe they do. But that being said, the favorite part is after everybody leaves and all the spectators go home and everybody sits around the fire, and you really get into the heart of the matter, and you start talking about traditions and things. And this one guy was a visitor, and he was just all caught up in the magical aspect of it all, and tell us your secrets, and tell us about this, tell us about that, And, they were kind of laughing about, there's no magic, man. It's all nature and vibration and energy and flow, And the guy just wanted more and more and more. And he said, tell me about the scary stuff that goes on in the woods. Tell me about this or that. And the man looks at him and he says, shh. Do not speak of them, because when you speak of them, they hear you, and then they see you, So I tell you that because if you think about this whole subject, the good and the bad, the light and the dark, the miracle and the wonder, and then the scary of it all, it's like you really can't have it both ways. When you connect into the goodness and the love and the loved ones and the kindness and the wonder, you can also connect into the other. You see what I'm saying? It's like we think about it. Well, when we speak of them and they're paying attention and they connect in and they can hear us, why wouldn't the other side, the evil, be able to do the same thing?
Right.
And then you got trouble. So I just wanted to say that, because a lot of people are like, oh, that can't happen. I'm like, think about it. You can't have it both ways, So that's a little bit of the scary part of it. So, Steve, out of all of the battles, of just each one more horrific than the other, Antietam, the Chickamauga River running so thick and red with blood that you couldn't see the bottom anymore, and you couldn't walk across it without stepping on a body. People don't realize the horrific loss of life that really happened during these battles and skirmishes, and the effect of the townspeople. I mean, in Gettysburg alone, I think it was, I want to say, I could be off on my numbers, but I'm going to be close. You've got in the town and the outskirts of the town, there was, I think, about 2,300 people living there. And this is, big. And you've got the outskirts as well between there and Cashtown and I think it's Hoover. And then within 3 days, they had 173,000 converged on that little town. And that happened all over when all these people got together. And then all of a sudden, you don't just have the dead, dying, and wounded. You've got the wounded cattle. You've got the wounded horses. You've got the livestock. You've got destroyed homes. And it's just absolute. Everything is turned asunder all at once. And that's an amazing amount of energy to just be released all at once into the atmosphere. You have a story about an entity that was seen flying amongst the dead.
Yeah, that was there at Chickamauga. in
Okay.
Georgia at Fort Oglethorpe there. They still see it to this day. It's called Old Green Eyes. That's what they somewhat affectionately refer to it as. And there was a Park Service employee that was very well versed in the sightings and stuff. I think he's retired there, but you can find some of his accounts online. But yeah, they claim that not only is it there now and previously, but it was also seen floating among the dead and dying while the war was raging on. So, what on earth was that? Was that something that was already there, that had been there? Some sort of ageless entity, or was it something that was drawn there due to the pain and human suffering? And there's just been some horrific stuff there on the tower there in Snodgrass Hill. And night there was some college kids that had gone in there and gone up in Wilder Tower, and something scared one of them so bad he was in a hurry to get out and didn't realize he was still on the second floor and not the ground floor, and ran out the window.
Oh,
And
no.
messed himself up good. So yeah, but that whole battlefield is just, it's got an eerie feeling to it. Just something off there, something not right. Even more so than some of the other battlefields. And I've got an account. It's in a group of stories that I have on my channel. It's called the Vanishing Soldier or something like that. I can't remember the name right now, but a guy I knew was driving through that area and saw somebody in a Civil War uniform at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and it turned out there was no reenacting or anything going on at the time, and he thinks it was an encounter with a ghost. And I said, just the forlorn look on this guy's face. He just looked so sad. He just wanted to stop and pick him up, but one thing, he was already past him, and then he realized he probably wasn't real. But the interesting thing about that, it shook him up, and he ended up spending the night with the girl he was there to see in Georgia. And the next morning was when they had that horrific crash in the fog. I think it's around South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, just near Chattanooga there. There was like a 80 or 90 car pileup, and lots of people died in that. And he conjectured that if he hadn't gotten scared and stayed longer than he meant to, he would have been right in the middle of that wreck.
Wow.
So he credits that soldier for literally saving his life.
Wow. Huh. And see, that's not the first story I've heard that was like that, where a specter that you think you had the unfortunate timing to run into turned out that they were actually trying to help in some way. That's amazing. Boy, there's so many stories pop into my head about that. How about you, Kevin? Did you ever heard of a ghost of any kind coming to actually stop you from doing something that might harm you? Or
I've heard of plenty of those. I don't believe, unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, that's ever happened to me. But again, in my adventures, the spirits do play a big role in how they go about doing things. But I've never had that. But I've heard of plenty of these stories that you just shake your head, because it seems to me that a lot of people that go through things like this are the non-believers, the skeptics. Right. That this happens to, and I don't think the spirits are doing this to say, hey, we're going to convert you, but just to say, hey, we're here and this is what we can do to help you. And I've heard a lot of these stories, like I said, and most of these people are like, I don't believe in these things, and this happened to me. I don't know what that was. And I've got some friends that are like that are staunch skeptics, and they say, this was weird. This did happen. I don't know what this was. And I just smiled, because it's like, well, I know what it is. But they were just like, yeah, and they're still skeptics after all this, and that's fine. Right. But again, the spirit world is fascinating in the way that they interact with the living, and they can help us.
Yeah. I've known, multiple from, people, I just put my car keys right here. You know how like some people have, like, as you come in the door, many people have like a hook you put your keys on, or there's a table with a bowl, you put it right there. You have your habits that you go into where you put your car keys and your house keys there. And they're going back, they live alone, and they're going back to get their car keys, and I can't find my car keys. And then they're looking through the house. Where did I put them? And the next thing you know, after a few minutes or sometimes, longer than that, they finally find the keys right where they thought they were, in the bowl, on the table, on the hook. And then something like Steve just said, they get out there, they get to the car, and they find out that they had maybe avoided a wreck or a tree falling or something where they would have been at that stop sign or that stoplight, or definitely been around that accident, or missed that plane that crashed, or that train had an accident. And I think those two may very well be a helpful ghost, or a spirit of some kind that's trying to help. And we get so annoyed until we find out, and it just puts us right down in the chair where we have to think about it and go, wow, what just happened? That's pretty amazing. I mean, I've known people that have gotten phone calls that said, don't get on that plane. And I don't know, if you have to be someplace, your business or whatever, and you're trying to get a plane, you're caught in the hubbub of the hurry of the whole thing. You got to get your suitcase, you got to make sure you have tickets and all this other stuff. Then you get a phone call from some, crackling and, all this like faraway voices, don't get on the plane. I don't think I'd get on the plane. I mean, if you did, wouldn't you be scared? Absolutely, mindless if you did get on the plane, just worrying what was going to happen, so there's lots of those stories that happen that way. And I don't know, it's like you, Kevin, it gives me a kind of a joy and like an inner smile where I'm just like, yeah, you got a little helper somehow,
Yeah, and like I said, it's funny because something I'm also doing another project down the road I'm working on now is I ask people for their ghost stories, just whatever, if they've come across anything, and I'm finding more and more people are coming up to me, oh hey, I don't know if this qualifies, but this happened to me, and it's something along those lines, and I'm like, oh yeah, that qualifies, and they know what they're doing, and then that leads to the whole takes you down the rabbit hole, because then everybody wants to know, well, what do you know about this? I know you have this book, blah blah, and they want to pick your brain, and it's just like, okay, so it just kind of snowballs.
Yeah, and I think Steve would agree with this, that I just love those conversations. I'm like, yeah, what do you got?
Mhm.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that was always my thing as a kid. My parents were quite a bit older than most of my friends' parents, so my parents were like the age of a lot of my friends' grandparents. So whenever we went to visit their friends, it was all a bunch of old people. And that was my thing. I'd wait for a lull in the conversation and then see who I could get a ghost story out of. And that's how my first book came about, was stories that I'd collected from childhood onward, from family and family friends.
Yeah, those are the greatest. I mean, who doesn't like sitting around a campfire? And I mean, I actually just told my family, I told my son, and I'm trying to get both of them together. So let's go get a cabin and, with the fire pit, go canoeing for a day, just stay the night and sit around the fire, and have a cold beer and tell ghost stories. Said, Mom, you tell ghost stories all the time. Why do you have to go in the woods to tell ghost stories? I said, because because it's fun.
It's just better in the woods or in a dark house, or
Yep.
somewhere that's not too well lit and where there are shadows in the corner and things.
Yep. I'm sitting right now on my back porch and I'm staring into the dark woods, and I'm sure they're looking back at me. Can you hear the crickets? I don't know if you can
Yes.
pick up.
I can hear it. Yes.
Yeah, I can hear them.
It's just, I mean, it's coming on that season. You can smell fall in the air, just on the wind, and that time of year. And who doesn't love it, But I've got one, and I don't know. You guys might recall this. The first time I ever heard it, I think I was young, and I can't remember if it was on Unsolved Mysteries or Sightings, maybe. In search of those fantastic shows that we all waited for over Friday and Saturday night to get a little bit of maybe a ghost story or UFO story. And it was about the young gentleman. He was on the Confederate side, and it was in Gettysburg. And just the sheer horror stories that come out of the Civil War amazes me. Some of them are just amazing. Like I remember standing in the museum looking at two bullets that actually collided together and melted as one in midair, and they have it on a plaque there. I've, multiple belt buckles with mini balls stuck in them, and just all those coincidences of like, how in the world something like that happened, and you have to think of how many bullets have to fly before two would collide in midair like that and just melt together. And then you think about it, what it was like to lay in the long grass and see stuff like that. It's just, and then to get back up and keep running, it blows my mind. But this was in the town, just closer to the town, where near a farmhouse that had been used to. Once the battle was over, you always had those that stayed by from the winning side to pick up the dead and the wounded and take them to the designated places, whether the wounded was going to a makeshift field hospital or basement or somebody's living room or their kitchen or their porch. I mean, they had to take everything over. So you can't even imagine what it's like to be a civilian in this, right? I mean, all of a sudden, there's dead and dying all over your house, and you're making bread for 404. So it was amazing. So it was a hurried type of thing where you were doing a very quick triage, and you were seeing, okay, who could be saved, who could go to the field hospital, who's dead. Well, this young man was wounded, and I believe he was knocked out, and they thought he was dead. And they were using what they used to call an old ice house. I know you guys know what I mean when I say that old, like, ice cellar. You had like a little stone room where you kept all your potatoes and things like that, and then they'd have like the hay where they'd probably keep the ice and it wouldn't melt as fast. And they were putting some of the dead there and cleaning up, like, the front yard of this home, and they just piled the dead in there to get them out of the way because it was hot. The bodies were decaying very quickly. The smell was atrocious, with the horses and everything. So they're piling up all the dead in there. And horrors of horrors, this man wakes up. Now, he's wounded in several places. He can't walk, and he can hardly move. He can barely move top half of his body and scream. Well, there's still so much going on with all the screaming from the wounded and everything else happening. Nobody heard it. And they did do a hurrying of the burials there. What they would normally do is they would take the winning side, happened to be at that battle was Union, and they'd take everybody and separate them. And oftentimes they didn't have time to bury people properly. They would dig mass graves and throw everybody in them, and that was a daunting task because there was quite a few. And by the time they found this young man who had been screaming with hundreds and hundreds of pounds of dead and dying on top of him, he couldn't move, couldn't crawl out. He had gone completely insane. And he lived for a couple of days after they found him, and he was just screaming and jabbering on. And that man got one of the few coffins that they had. The Union felt so bad for what they had overlooked, that he was alive and what he had gone through, that they gave him a proper burial and a little service and said prayers over him, and then they moved on. Unfortunately, the young man did not move on. 125 years later, people are living in that house, and the ice house was actually part of, they had built on additions and everything else over where that ice house had stood. And they made it almost like a wine cellar, a cooling place, because they kept all the rocks and everything that they'd used to build that. And an older couple had lived in there, and they always had problems with electricity in that area, and because you go down their cellar and across this little room, and it had a wood door. And the man would go in there to get wine or, some of his tools or something like that. And the light bulbs would go on and off. And you hear this banging. And at night, this young man decided what he would do is he would bang this wooden door, just bang it and bang it and bang it. You're screaming and hollering, and they'd go down there and the lights would go on and off. So for 125 years, this guy's trying to get attention. They finally get help. They find out that this is the guy that was stuck under the pile. And he's angry and he's confused still. and he's mad. Nobody's hearing him scream for 125 years. In those 5 days he lived under the body. And they finally had to get a priest to come in there and do an exorcism, which I thought was very interesting. And they weren't really exorcising the man, they were exorcising the room, that he had built up so much anger. He wasn't evil, but he had built up so much anger, and he was so confused that they had to go through that whole ritual and do their very best. Once they got some of the anger off and the, just the sheer trauma of it, they could finally talk to him, and they finally crossed him over. And that's one of my all-time favorites. That's stuck with me forever, that poor man. Are you guys there?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm still here. I was just kind of seeing all that in my head.
It's devastating, is it not? I mean, we all heard of the anguish, and I can't imagine. You're under a pile of bodies that for 5 days are decomposing, and the smell and the fluids and everything. Oh, poor guy. But he finally got crossed, and I think that's one of my favorites because there's no time is so it's not relevant. I once had somebody tell me that, after time they just dissipate and they go on. Well, no, they don't. I don't believe they do, but I don't know. I mean, that one gets to me. How about you guys?
Yeah, that's one of those where you if you try to put yourself in a position like that, and again, I'm thinking that this is probably one of those things where I could actually see this happening in almost every war imaginable. Something like this could have happened, and it's either way. It's just, but to be like that, and then for the living to not even acknowledge your presence, that's just even worse. So this poor guy, he just for all this time, and I'm sure again, because like I said, I'm always hearing, I'm of the opinion myself that they have no concept of time and space, so they don't know if it's 1975 or 1880 or whatever. So he's just like, well, geez, I'm trying to get all their attention, I can't get them, and I don't know what's going on. So the frustration level plus the sadness and the anger and the insanity, that's just wow, just a powerful combination there.
A lot of energy there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was really cool that the priest hung in there, because a lot of times you can't get people to pay attention. There's so many hoops and things that you got to jump through to get somebody to come, but he happened to be a family friend, and he stuck in there, and he listened to the people that were sensitive enough to pick up little pieces here and there, and they did the research, they did the time. They, that not only did they find out that that area, that part of that room that it still stood was used, and of course it was also stone. So we often wonder about whether it was granite or something, or that would hold that memory even stronger.
Stone tape theory.
Yeah, and it was another one where people, absolute strangers, got together to help a stranger over a span of 125 years. Somebody finally listened, and that one always makes me think of, like you just said, Kevin. Like somebody is banging on your wall or banging your cabinets or throwing the remote across the room. Right? Everybody thinks, I got a demon in my house. No, you might just have an angry ghost that's trying to figure out what's going on and get your attention, so somebody will help them. And I think it's it always just touches my heart when people do take the time to try to unravel the mess and try to figure out what was going on, and and finally help this young man to rest, because he was probably 17, 19, 20 years old. That was an old man back then, older.
Right, and that's one thing that I've always wondered, and I can throw this out to you guys, because this is I value your guys' opinion, and I think you guys would have something on this. And I've posed this question to other people interested in the spirit world. Okay, so if you're an investigator and you're going into these places, now you've got the energy already there from whatever might be there or whoever might be there, and then you have all these groups going in and out, so you're picking up all this energy from the living and everything that adds to it and builds up and builds up. So my question is, does that make it 10 times worse, or does that kind of make them shrink in the background. I've always wondered about that. Is because all the energy from the living and the dead that's just mingling right there. I've always wondered because there's some of the obviously the paranormal hotspots that everybody talks about where they have an investigator every other week in and out of there. So that always leads me. I just kind of wondered what do you guys think about something like that?
What do you think, Steve?
Well, I think it could kind of go either way. I mean, one, if you've got a lot of people coming in and out that even have some ability, then they might get picky as far as to who they want to use their energy to try and communicate with. Because, it seems like it takes them a while to build up. And even if they're drawing off your electronics, your batteries go dead, your camera goes dead, and things like that, then the energy that they take in versus what they expel out, it's not very much. So it makes you wonder if they're just kind of waiting for the right energy, or maybe if they're drawing a little bit off everybody that comes through, and then it kind of just goes all out at once, regardless of who's there. I don't know. That would be an interesting thing to look into as far as how the energy is used and if it's used.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it all depends on the individual too, because Steve and I often bring up the movie Ghost, and as silly as that movie looked, with the medium who was kind of had abilities, was kind of faking it to make money, and then found out that the ghosts were gonna, that the Patrick Swayze ghost was going to use her to communicate with somebody he loved because he couldn't figure out how to do it. She wasn't paying attention. He didn't have the knowledge yet. He hadn't learned anything to be able to do stuff to get her attention. He's right there, and he can see her anguish, and he can see that she's in danger, and he's trying to warn her, and he doesn't know how to do it. And if you think back at that movie, how long it took him to just move that penny up the wall just to show her that he was there. And I often think about that because we don't know what they know how to do. We like to put things in like little files. And I think that those files often blur into each other as we learn a little bit more and a little bit more, because they're not all the same. People aren't all the same. Characters aren't the same. Knowledge is the same. Maybe their ability to understand and draw energy, like Steve said, they're not sure how to do it. And I don't know if there's a combination of energy. I do believe that there can be a house, say, and that house could have active spirits in it, ghosts in it, that are, one's in the cellar, one's in the attic, one, walks from the bathroom to the kitchen all day long, and every once in a while you might see a glimpse of that. But if the right person moves in, say there could be 5 families in there, never see a thing. Never noticed anything, never said, this place isn't haunted. What are you, crazy? And the next family could come in with, has somebody in it with abilities or the energy that it needs and the light that it connects to, whatever you want to call that. And then all of a sudden it's very active. I think that's also possible. And I also think it's very mean too when people go in and bang on the table, bang on this. Can you answer me? Can you do this? If you do this, we'll help you. And then they leave. Because how long is it going to take that ghost to gather more energy, to try to get attention?
Or
and
to
maybe
even trust somebody to do it. I like your man in the hole analogy, if you want to tell that. I've used that one a lot, but that's yours. I like the way you tell it.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I always say, ghosts were people too. And I really don't believe were, I believe are, because if it was me, I'd want somebody to help me or somebody I loved. Wouldn't we all, And if you think about it that way, it kind of changes your perspective on it. And it's like, a guy's walking along the street, all of a sudden he falls in a hole. And it's obviously a deep hole he can't get out of himself. And he's yelling and screaming and jumping and trying to climb and just still doesn't have enough to get out of that hole. And it doesn't really matter how he got there, or how long he's been in there. He's in the hole. And as people walk by, it's like, say, a policeman or something, would walk by and, you know, and he can't do it. He's not paying any attention, and he's calling out for help. He can't hear him, you know. And you know, what do you do if you're somebody like that, like some of the investigators or some people or homeowners or whatever, and they just lean over and go, yeah, buddy, you know, you bang on you know, the thing, or if you say something in my recorder or something like that, you know, I'll let you out. You know, you're basically throw down a rope and help the person out, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. It's literally the provoking and stuff. It's like, you know, if it were a guy in a hole, it'd be like, you know, how'd you get in that hole? What's it feel like to be in the hole? You
Right.
know, wouldn't you like to get out of there? And they go, yes, please. And then they pack up and leave. Oh, well, we confirm there's a guy in a hole here.
Yes, exactly. and I know that sounds mean, and I don't mean to put anybody down, because we're all learning, and you know, some people get very involved in tech, and I think that's wonderful. I've seen some amazing things come out of that, and I certainly don't understand all that equipment, and I know we're just trying to prove something with science, you know, so we can say this actually happened. There is actually evidence of the afterlife. We go on from here. We're not sure how or what, and I get that. But also, what's going on with the ghosts? You know, like this poor man here that was stuck under this pile for 5 days, going absolutely insane, wounded, hurt. You know, I can't imagine the condition. Well, there's a million stories like that, you know, and to just walk away, or you know, I had somebody tell me, oh gosh, this is terrible to tell, but I went to a convention once, and there was a couple of people that you'd know their names if I said it, and I won't. Well, there was a show on. Now, I'm an animal lover, and you know, I'll knock you over to help a turtle cross the road or something. I'd stop traffic for hours just to, you know. I mean, I'm just one of those lunatics, and I have no apologies for it. I will absolutely help something that's helpless. And so anyway, I'm watching this show, and it infuriated me to no end, because they kept talking about these dogs. Well, they went through the investigation, and they went through the whole thing, and they proved that there was a dog fighting thing that went on in this building. And they were just reveling in the fact that they got dogs barking, and they had ghost dogs there that were, you know, just going on with the show and on with the show. And I'm thinking, gosh, you went through all this to prove that it was this stick that was used to train these dogs, and you went all this to prove this. And, you know, I'm sure that they just didn't show it in the show, but they probably spent as much time after trying to find something that would come over from the other side or something like that and help these animals across, because you rarely hear of a ghost animal that can't go back and forth. They're usually just visiting. They're not really stuck. They want to be there, as far as I've learned. You know, I don't know anything. It's just my theory. I'm just saying, it seems to me, from what I've learned, that animals can do this. And for them to stay there and be stuck, they must have gone through such trauma. So it just infuriated me. Anyway, so I find myself, lo and behold, years later, and I'm sitting in this thing, and basically I just went in here because my husband needed to sit, his back hurt, and I figured, hey, we'll go in here and we'll sit for a little while and listen to this. And I was there because I said, look, the proceeds go to help homeless animals, you know, to rescue animals. So this is great, you know, win-win. And I listen to these people talking. They're talking all about animals and how much they've helped them and yada, yada, yada. And this thing went on for an hour. And then finally, Steve's going to laugh. Finally, they put this microphone up. And they said, well, if we have any questions from the audience, please come up, form a line. And I look at my husband, hold my purse. I go up to the microphone. He's just shaking his head. It's like, he looks over at my friends, and he's just like, she's not gonna. And my friend looks at him, goes, yes, she is. So I go up there and I ask the question, and I explain the episode and everything. And I said, you know, please tell me that you guys help these animals, because it's bothered me for years. And the guy looks at me and crosses his legs and looks right at me, and he goes, oh, we don't do that. We think that that's interfering with the spirit. with the ghost. So we wouldn't want to do that because that's interfering with what that spirit's going through. And I lost it. I absolutely lost it. I said, you got to be kidding. You spent 4 days interrogating these dogs and putting them through more, and then you just left them? Yeah, that's what you do. We're there to collect it. And I'm like, I can't. Are you serious? You know what I mean? And I just lost complete and total respect for, how is going there and antagonizing them and do you get my point? Not interfering with them. And then to think that they think that they've got some help, and then all of a sudden they're just there.
Just being there in the first place, you're already interfering with them. So
right.
What would be the point if you could help them to choose not to? That's just terrible.
Yeah, exactly. And the same thing it would be with this young man. If everybody just okay, well, let's just tear that part of the house down and and lock that door and so won't bang anymore, and we'll just sell it to the next.
Yeah. But I've heard of that where somebody would go to, say, a haunted bed and breakfast or something like that and offer to cross the spirit over. And the owners are like, no, we want our ghost. That's we make money because people come here to see the ghost or to stay in the haunted hotel or whatever. So I don't know the ethics involved there, but that would be a terrible spot to be in, I would think, for the ghost. And for the person that could cross it over, I'd probably just go ahead and do it anyway and not say anything.
Oh, yeah. I've known mediums that did that. Just like, you're my hero, baby.
Yep.
Oh, yes, he's still here. And take them home and, work with them at home and stuff like that till they could finally get them to listen. And I think that's awesome, because, like I said, they're people, It's just incredible to me. It's such an amazing subject, and it's also a scary and a creepy one because not one of us sitting here tonight or listening tonight would ever want to be a ghost that was stuck and have people just ignoring you on and on and on and on and on. Nobody would want to go through that, or your loved one. I think that's a very a scary thing. It's like we should all write a book on how not to be a ghost. Don't wind up a ghost. It's like how to not become one, because who would want to be? I know that we think about the funny, the tricksters and stuff like that, the actually this little story here it combines the two, because I knew a medium, I know her, she's very well known, that went into a very famous haunted bar to help one of the ghosts that had been there for many a year, went through a horrible death, and was being held back by two stronger ghosts, and this one couldn't cross over. Like they were held in some kind of eternal loop of hell, by these stronger entities. And so she went in to help and was told that very thing. You can get all the information you want, but we don't want you to, take any, get them to leave or anything like that. We don't want you to banish them or do whatever you do, because we make a lot of money on this and we need them. And she thought that was very cruel. So she crossed her and and then just told and left the other two there and figured, well, I crossed that one, but you can have the other two. And also when she went upstairs to, because it takes an awful lot out of you. We all know this, it drains you so much. She went up to get a cool glass of water. While she was sitting there, here comes 4 cowboy-looking guys, obviously from another time. She knew immediately before they even got there that there were ghosts coming in. She felt the energy change. She looks at them, and she sat there at the bar. I think that's such a neat thing. She's sitting there at the bar, and they went belly up to the bar, and they're acting like they're ordering stuff and everything else, and they're talking to her. And she says, well, what are you guys doing? They said, we like to be here. They were jumpers, Steve. Mm-hmm. She said, we like to be here. This place is going to fill up, and we get lots of energy, and then we can find somebody who's got a weakness, and we jump in them, and we can get a little taste of beer, maybe start a fight, and have some fun. We love it here. And they had no intention of crossing over. They were fine. She tried. They weren't having any part of it. She just finished her water, and she left. So, that's incredible. It really is. Have you ever heard of anything like that, Kevin? I call them double. But
Oh yeah, yeah. That like I said, that doesn't set well with me either. I'm not a big fan of provoking anything, but
right.
especially the spirit world, because I tell people all the time, because people are like, I work in a haunted workplace, but
Hmm.
it's very things happen on their time, and you try to explain that to people. Oh, what'd you hear last night? I didn't hear anything, because they didn't. Well, why not? And they ask you these crazy questions, then you got to explain to them. Look, we're not on their time. We're on their time, not the other way around. They'll
Hmm.
let us know when they want us to say, "Hey, Kevin, I'm here. Poke, poke. Let me throw the book across the floor." They don't do it like on command, like a performing monkey. And I hate it when these shows,
Yep.
go on here and then got to slam stuff down. And we know you're here, but whatever. And it's just like, oh my god, I want to smack you. Stop. Leave them alone. They'll let you know when if they're there, because some of them don't want to be known, so they're not going to let you know. And then of course, you got some of these shows that have to have evidence, quote unquote, every 5 minutes, so everyone thinks, okay, well, that's how it really is. No, it's not. But
No, it's not. It's
yeah,
not.
yeah, I've heard of that, and like I said, I think that's bad. But I've also heard the whole, oh yeah, we don't want them to disappear. It's good for business, and I've heard that argument as well. And I'm just like, oh, geez,
It makes me sick to my stomach, but in a lot of ways too. And I've gone in and done the same thing. I've gone into homes where they said, no, don't, just find out what they want, and it's fine if they stay here. We kind of enjoy having them around. I said, honey, ghosts aren't pets. You know what I mean? If you were stuck here, and I said, I'll tell you what happens. Said the universe has a way of making you learn things, and sometimes the lessons are very tough. And I said, how would you feel that when you pass, they're there waiting next to you to maybe hold you back so you can see what it was like and what you put them through? You know, it's the same thing as, you being on the shore and you're, oh, the sharks are great. This is great. And isn't this wonderful? And Shark Week and all this other stuff. Yeah, get in the water with them, baby. And your attitude is going to change. And I know entities that do that. They're called soul collectors, and they absolutely do that. And it's nothing to play with. It really isn't. It's like, okay, you wanted to learn about ghosts. Let's see what you want to hang out with us for a couple of centuries and see how you like it. You want to bang on some tables? Here you go. I mean, it happens. It really happens. I often wonder about these people like Vasilla Axe Murder House, and things like that. I just had somebody on the show not too long ago. I love her attitude. I love how she did everything, and she went in there just comfort the kids and never talked about the murder or anything like that. She absolutely says they're stuck there, and the mom's trying her best to gather whatever she needs to gather to get them to go over. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me, man? All these years, these poor kids stuck in that axe murder house, and people just keep coming in there, and it's not right. And I think the same thing happens on battlefields. I mean, day after day, hour after hour, a different group going out there and, asking the same questions and things like that. Of course, your curiosity, but when you put yourself in their shoes, it changes. It really does. Have you guys ever heard of any of the stories on these battlefields? I know there's been a couple right outside Devil's Den. I talked to Steve once about this one where the guy is sitting there, he's doing a reenactment. So he's in uniform and he's sitting there and he's having trouble with his weapon. And I can't remember what it was because, the reenactors, they're so intent on having every stitch in their uniform just right and everything is very authentic. And he had some cartridges, back then it was the ball and the powder and that was wrapped in a little paper. And one of the guys sitting behind him on the rock in Devil's Den turns around and says, here you go, here you go, buddy, you have one of mine. Well, then he turns around and the guy's gone. Well, this man actually took this cartridge and brought it to one of the guys that had a museum, and it actually dated back as an actual cartridge. I've heard that story happen in Devil's Den. One time it was the cartridges for the weapon, and another time a man was smoking a cigarette and something happened or whatever, his pack got wet, and the man popped up behind him and gave him a hand-rolled one. and tobacco. So now you're smoking ghost tobacco and you're shooting ghost cartridges out of your weapon. How does that happen? How do you cross an inanimate object through the ether like that? I don't get it. Anybody have an idea?
Yeah, you got me. I would know it. It happens with, teleportation or apportation, things that they do have the ability to move things and bring things from other places and take things away, but no idea how it works.
Wow. How about you, Kevin? You got
Yeah,
a
yeah, I have no idea. But I will say one thing. When I was last year, I actually did an interview with a newspaper in the town that I went to school for in Pennsylvania. And right, like 2 days before I did the interview, I had an apportation incident with my keys, and it happened right in front of me. It was the craziest thing. They moved my keys from one table to another table. Like in the split second I turned around, my keys were on another table. It was crazy.
wow.
So and I explained, and it was one of the things I was like, okay, well, I got to tell the reporter this because this guy doesn't know anything. So I had to explain it to him, but he was just like, wait a minute, so let me get this straight. So the time you turned around, your keys went from one place to the other. I said, absolutely, they did. And I said, I'm still trying to scratch my head, figure this one out, but they sure did. And he was just like, how do they do that? I said, man, I don't know. I said, I'm trying to figure this all out. But yeah, I've heard different stories like that, and it's really amazing how that can happen. How you can smoke a Civil War cigarette, quote unquote, or something like a cartridge or something from that era, or hey, maybe if you're hungry, they'll give you a heart attack, and it's just like, that's crazy. How can that happen 150 years later? But I've heard these stories all around the world about different things happening like that. I have no clue.
I don't either. And to actually take that cartridge to the museum, because Gettysburg is full of museums, they have a lot of artifacts and things, and it's amazing. And to actually have it where it dates back to that era, it just, you can't do it now. You can't get the paper that's that old. You can't get it's, how in the world? I mean, but these things pop up all over, and I don't know if it's just the sheer magnitude of the loss. So we've got so many of these stories, like the two bullets that collided together, or, it's amazing. And it seems like a lot of them happen during the times that, reenactments go on. Now, I've been in reenactments all around this country, in, Alabama, all over, little skirmishes to great big battles, and seen them. And there's just something that happens to you when you're in that. I was in one in Alabama, and it was a huge field, and it was a national park, so there was lots and lots of space, and then there was grove of trees all around you, but it's just a wide open field. And it was almost like, I can't really explain it. I don't know whether I walked through something and wound up for a few split moments, walked into their time, or they walked into mine, but the atmosphere just changed around me. And I'm just walking and I'm minding my own business. My family's over on one side, and I'm just jetting across this field. And there's reenactors all around, and there's groups. So walking past a group of 5 guys talking in full uniform with, rifles and everything of that time period, it wasn't anything because they were all over the place. Well, I walked up into this one group, and it was 4 men standing in a circle just talking. And I knew it was different because, like I said, the atmosphere changed. It was almost like I walked through something heavy and then it let go. And for a second, I'm standing among these guys, and they're talking to me like I'm one of them. Like I said, split second, I couldn't even tell you what they were saying because their voices were kind of echoey. Like they were right in front of me. They were 2 feet in front of me on either side and in the front. But they sounded so far away. I can't explain that. And for that split second, I was kind of like shaking my head going, I actually backed out of it because I thought, man, I just accidentally walked up into a group of people talking, how rude of me. That was my thoughts. At the same time, I'm thinking their voices sound so weird. And I backed up out of it. And when I backed up out of it, everything changed again, and they were still there, but I walked right through one of the guys. And I turned around and looked, and they're gone. And I have no idea how to explain that. And I thought I was crazy, which I could very well be. But when these things happen to us, they happen in such a split second. It's hard to explain how it happened or what you felt or what you smelled. But when you look back at it and go, their voices sounded so strange. I mean, it sounded like they were talking, 50 feet away from me. But I was right there next to it. It's so strange. I can't explain that. But things happen mostly when they're a reenactment. I think it stirs it up. Of course, the sounds and the sound memories and things like that. A lot of paranormal investigators use sound, like music and things like that, to get their attention, something familiar to them. I know I've been in rooms where they've done that, and it almost always gets some type of reaction or calming effect to them. And this one other story that was really good was during the shooting of Gettysburg. Can you imagine what Gettysburg was like during the shooting of that movie, when all the reenactors and they had to get people to volunteer to come in and just to make the battle scenes and Pickett's charge and things like that. And the townspeople pitched in, of course, and people were giving rides to all these reenactors. They were moving them from where the battlefield was into the hotels back into town, or, whoever was putting them up or whatever. So they were shuttling them back and forth. And this one lady, she offered a pickup truck for rides. And they'd go in after the shooting was over, and a bunch of guys would pile in the back, and she'd drop them off at the restaurant or the hotel, wherever they were going. And all the townspeople did this. And this one lady, after she dropped everybody off, they patted the truck and they said, thanks for the ride, and gave her a thumbs up and stuff. And her truck's empty. And she's halfway home, and she hears this banging in the back of the truck. And she looks in the rearview mirror, and there's two fully dressed Civil War soldiers sitting in the back of her truck. So she quick pulls over and thinks somebody didn't get out. And so she pulls over, and she looks in the mirror, she doesn't see anybody. She gets out, she looks around. There's nowhere anybody could have got out and run off. Well, I always that story a little different and said, maybe they thought this is how everybody's getting out of this hell. I'm going to hitch a ride up out of here. Isn't that amazing?
That is. Or they just saw what they thought were other soldiers getting in these strange vehicles. And I'll go get in one too.
Uh-huh.
And it makes you wonder if there's anything in that movie that may have been captured that wasn't actors or extras or whatever, that's something that was already there. I'd like to take the time to go through it frame by frame and see just what you could find in there.
I didn't think about that. How many must have just got up and run with them again through Pickett's charge, or, the charge up Little Round Top, or, oh my gosh, how many ghosts must be in that film? I'd love to sit down and talk to the people that filmed that.
Yeah, see where'd all these extra extras come from?
Exactly. Because I know when I was there, we were having breakfast, and all of a sudden we hear this cannon fire. It's 7:30 in the morning. Who's, are they warming up? Where's the reenactment going to be? Man, we can catch that too while we're here, And the waitress comes up and he said, are they gearing up for something? Are they going to have a reenactment, or is there some kind of ceremony going on? And I said, we just heard cannon fire. It's like three distinct bam. What that sounds like, even though you don't hear cannons go off all the time. You can definitely tell the difference, especially if you've been in the Army, heard, loud munitions go off. And she says, oh, we hear that all the time. That's just, the ghostly sounds of cannon fire coming from it. It was like, sometimes they hear bugles. Wow. All the Wow.
Now, that reminds me of a story I heard in Knoxville, there where the Battle of Fort Sanders was. A new lady that lived in a Victorian-era house there that had ghosts. And she said that any time that they set off fireworks in downtown Nashville, Labor Day or New Year's Eve or whatever, she said the activity would pick up in her house. And that's what she finally concluded that it was, that her ghosts were hearing this boom, boom, boom of cannon fire and not realizing it was fireworks, and they would come out more or be more active, more activity in her house from these Civil War era ghosts. That's just fascinating when you think about it. And that was another one of those places where the battles were just awful. There was one account I read of where they dug a ditch there, and I don't remember which side was which, but one side was on the upper side of the ditch, and then the other side was on the lower. The lower side just kept coming, being shot, falling into the ditch. And this was like a 10, 12 feet ditch they had dug out there. And it eventually filled up with bodies to the point that the invading ones coming up the hill could walk across the bodies. You think about how many bodies it would take to fill I don't know how long the ditch was, but 14 feet deep and probably that far across. And then, like you were talking about, the guy that was buried under the bodies and things, you know that everybody in that ditch wasn't dead, so there were probably not immediately anyway. So they were probably wounded and dying in there, crushed under the weight of other wounded, dead, and dying. So that's just no wonder that place is haunted. I mean, that kind of energy and that kind of suffering, that's going to leave an imprint no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I mean, yeah. Have you ever heard of any of that? Have you ever on the battlefields, Kevin? Have you ever heard a bugle call or horses running by or heard firing of weapons or anything like that on the way?
Yeah, definitely. Before I go into that story though, I just want to let you guys know something. I'm actually in a hotel right now. I'm down here visiting my girlfriend. But my phone just went off here, the room phone, and there's no reason that it should have went off. I have no messages or anything to the front desk. And for some reason, before we even started this, I had a feeling that was going to happen. And sure enough, it did. I just had a feeling. I said, well, you watch, that phone's going to go off sometime during this interview. I know it. I was thinking that before we went on the air. And sure enough, it just went off and scared the hell out of me because I wasn't expecting it.
My mouse batteries, which were just replaced recently with fresh ones, have just about gone dead. It keeps saying connected, connection lost, connected, connection lost. So the spirits are working with us tonight.
Wow. Did you pick up the phone, Kevin, to see if anybody's there? If they want to say something, I'll listen.
I was going to because I'm actually walking back and forth because I have a headset on, so I'm walking back and forth because it's a little chilly in here, and the phone went off and scared the hell out of me, and I went over and it's the message button, the little red message button. The phone never rang. I've been here since 4:30 this afternoon. Wow. But I knew that phone was going to go off, and I knew it, and I'm just thinking, am I too loud or something? Because I don't think there's too many people in this hotel, but I hear doors slamming, but they're like farther down the hall. Right. And I knew that phone was going to go off, and sure enough, it just rang.
Amazing.
Wow. Well,
like I said, they always want to be a part of this.
Yes, and I can tell, thank your spirits, because my electronics have not been the same since the last time we talked. And I'm just clearing it all out. I'm getting all new stuff I have to. I mean, it's just absolutely, nobody can figure out what happened to it.
Wow,
so I get it. But if somebody wants help, please, speak up. Let us know, because you got 3 people here that will listen to you. I promise.
Yes, absolutely. So, but getting back to your question, yes. In Ghosts and Me, I lived in Winchester, Virginia for a little while, and that's, Battlefield Central. Last count, I believe, Winchester changed hands between the North and the South more than 70 times. So it's a very, very, like I said, if they're the reenactors in that area. If you don't get it right, they'll literally try to fight you if you're wrong. And again, I was a reporter at the time, so I did a couple reenactment coverage, and I had to be precise 100%. If there was one thing wrong, I would get the phone call, and they would start screaming at me, and it was just like, this is bizarre. Come on, this is 100 years old, whatever. But they had to have it precise. So anyway, I heard Phantom Dixie being played one time at 3:00 in the morning for no reason. There was no reason for Dixie to be played at that time in the morning, and also cannon fire. Again, 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Me and my girlfriend heard the same thing, and I put it in my book. But yeah, it was just amazing. And then of course we asked around, and Nobody had any reason that should have went like that. But we found out later that we were living near Fort Collier battlefield, which was a minor skirmish during the war, but yet, people had gotten killed there, and we lived maybe 100 yards away and didn't even know it. So, yeah, it's just amazing that these things happen, and we're just like, wow, how can that happen? That's there, that. But it was distinct. There was, and like you said, there, if you've heard cannon fire, that is distinct, and that's
Right.
cannon fire.
Right. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Steve had to step off for just a second, so Kevin and I are going to talk for a minute. But that's just, I don't know what category to put that in. I often try not to put things in category, but you want to try to understand so you can use it in the future. I don't know if that's what we would call a residual haunting, where it's just a like a timestamp or something with such emotion has made an imprint on the atmosphere, and when everything in the atmosphere gets just right, it plays back. Um, like the Phantom Regiment in Gettysburg. There, I think it's in Triangular Field. Often they'll see a whole regiment, excuse me, a whole color guard, excuse me, and it's like 5 or 6 people, and they're carrying the flag, and they have the drummer, and they're walking across the field, just continuing on like they did before. But they're actually, if you really pay attention, they're about a foot off the ground. And often I've heard stories and talked with people that say that, the spirit world is, we keep always saying, what we learned as kids, heaven's up here, hell's down here. And we always look up when we're talking, to loved ones or whatever. But often mediums and psychics will tell me it's right about here, and they'll hold their hand about 2.5 feet off the ground. And I just think that's amazing. It's like different layers, and it's not just dimensions, but it's also layers and frequencies and vibrations and where you vibrate at, as like energy. And it
Yeah.
just, it blows my mind. Um, and, we think about all these stories and then try to glean what we can from them. Our heart breaks because we don't want to see anybody suffer. Um, but I also try to understand what they're going through because I use that in my communication. I know you do too, and so does Steve. Because you try to understand, and I know you also do this in with a living in life. You're a counselor, and you work with
Mhm.
people who have issues in their life, and talking to a ghost is very much like that. It's very much like therapy. I think that if we were very wise in trying to go in on an investigation, we take a little bit of everything with us. Somebody who is almost a therapist or a counselor that can speak with them and try to find out where their underlying issues are, so we can get them to listen. I did that in Gettysburg, just on a wing and a prayer. I was basically told to go there, and they would not leave me alone. And I don't know who they is, because when I went to Gettysburg, about so many, I guess, about 7 years ago when this happened, and it was just a cacophony of coincidences and serendipity and just right in your face, go. And I had no idea. But I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm going. I'm going. I don't know why I'm supposed to go. I don't know why I'm drawn there. I often think about, reincarnation. Did I die there? I'm very big in leave no man behind, being in the army, and I'm very tight with my brothers and the people that I was with, and veterans and things like that. I'm constantly trying to do something to help. Um, but they're veterans too. They're your brothers too. They're just because they're 100 years ago, you have a connection with them because, being a soldier. So I don't know if it's something like that, like I died there, or part of me is still left there, and I feel like I've left them behind and I need to go help. I don't know what it is. Why I'm drawn to that battlefield, because I'm 20 minutes away from Fort Monmouth and the Battle of Monmouth, and not far from Trenton and all the things that happened in the Revolutionary War. But I don't feel that pull, and I don't have the same feeling when I go there as deep as this. So to run off a couple of things. I mean, there's more in the chapter in the book, and I know you read the book, and thank you again for the kind review. And I'm so glad you enjoyed it. That means more to me than anything, that you got something from reading the book. And Steve and I are just thrilled anytime we hear that. So thank you again.
Yeah, that like I said, I read that cover to cover, and I encourage your audience, if they haven't yet, go out and get it, because they will. If they're listening to this show, then they too are paranormal. They want to learn, they want to know. That's the book to get. Like I said, I read it cover to cover, and was just blown away by a lot of the stuff in there, and could relate to a lot of it. It was just a really excellent read. So I suggest anybody that loves the paranormal, go out and get that book.
Thank you so much. You're so kind. And that's why it was written, for that very reason, because whoever picks it up, maybe you can get a little bit of confirmation in your own experiences or your own thoughts. And that just, it makes my heart just glad to hear, because that's the whole reason I went through that and pulled all that out. It wasn't easy putting all that in a book and going through all those things again. Not all of them were good experiences. But
no, and I got a lot. I got like goosebumps when I read a lot of those, because I was like, finally, yes, I know exactly what she was going through at that time, because I've been there. I've done that. And again, I love reading that. I love when I listen to a number of these podcasts, when the people, the guests on there have the same opinion as I do, or they've been through the same thing. I get those goosebumps, those chills, like finally, kindred spirits, so to speak. They've been there. They've experienced these things. I'm not alone here. And it just kind of does that. But I was doing that throughout that whole book. So, like I said, it was an excellent read, and then I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. And I know, being that the way you feel, the chapter on Gettysburg, the one that I read from earlier in the episode, Who Could Love Me? Well, it's that chapter. I called it that because I dedicated it to that young man, because the way that it happened for me, I know I had like 7 in front of me. I could feel them come up little at a time, little at a time. They were paying attention. And I directed my thoughts to the highest ranking officer there, because I figured that they would follow, whether it be a sergeant or whoever, that they would follow him more. I was pressed for time, and I'm like, okay, we got a lot to do. Let's go. It's like, it's like, I'm here, somehow your people got in touch with my people, and they wanted me here to do this right now. Because I let them guide me that whole time. I'm like, my sons are going, where are we going? I don't know. They're going to lead us. We'll know when we get there. It was so amazing how it happened. But I mean, even getting there, this was the year that they closed all the national parks. Okay. It was the 150th anniversary. Okay. Of the Battle of Gettysburg. It was October 31st. So it's Halloween night, 150th anniversary. You know what I'm saying? And I kept telling my sons, he couldn't get off from work, and then all of a sudden somebody stepped up and wanted the night. This one over here, something happened to his paycheck, and I said, don't worry, if we're supposed to go, the money will come. And I went home, and bip, on my email there was this coupon I never sent for, never heard of the place. That was the exact amount of money that he would have gotten in the check that he was going to use. So it was replaced.
Oh, wow.
I go into the drugstore. I kid you not. I get off the phone with one of them, and we were talking about, I might not be able to get off that night. I said, if you were supposed to go, it'll happen. Have faith. We're going. Well, the parks aren't even open. Have faith. We're going. So the park opens up the day before we go, because you can't get in Gettysburg without, it's all a national park,
Yeah.
That's the battlefield. So all these things kept happening. So I go in the drugstore, hang up the phone with him. I said, have faith. Don't worry. We're going. And I walk in the drugstore, and I'm in line, and somebody behind me had a child, and he screamed, and I had a big purse with me at the time. And he screamed, your mom, you hear a kid scream, you turn fast. And my purse knocked all these DVDs that were in the impulse aisle while I'm standing in line to pay for my stuff. And all these DVDs fall at my feet. And I'm like, oh gosh, how you do. And you bend over, you start picking them up. And I look down, and there's 5 DVDs on the floor. 2 of them are face down, and 3 of them are face up. And I'm looking at the cover of it, and I'm looking right at the cover of Gettysburg, the movie. All three. I said to myself, what? Okay, guys, I get it. And I said, no, because you're still trying to talk yourself out. I said, no.
Yeah.
I said, it's just a display for that. It's 150th anniversary. Of course, they'd all be up front. And I flipped the other ones over, and one of them's Weekend at Bernie's, and another one's something completely different. I'm like, they only flipped over the ones that were getting. And I'm like, that's it. I'm going. So, but the chapter was written for the young gentleman that kind of came up last, his energy that came up last, and behind the others, and was kind of walking behind, almost like in a figure eight pattern. He kept getting my attention because I'm like, these guys are actually standing and listening and calming because they're listening to what I'm saying, and we're talking about explaining, what do you see? Do you notice that people, they look different, they speak differently? Do you see us? One says yes. And do you see that things have changed? And then one told me that that's why they're there, because this wood line didn't change. They were standing under what's called a witness tree. It's a tree that was there during the battle. So the tree grew, but it never really changed the visual much, and they felt comfort there. So this guy is doing this figure eight behind, and finally I'm trying to connect them into that love energy and trying to get them past the battle and more onto their loved ones, and trying to get their energy to move more toward the light. And he says, who could love me after the things I've done? And it was just so, the weight of that, my heart just sank, and I focused on him, and we worked together, worked through some of that to try to get him. Well, did you ever, I think, okay, you were an orphan, you never had parents, you never had, you were connected to a brother that you fought with? Did you feel that friendship? That's love. Did you ever have a dog, a pet, something that you love? Just to try to get him to remember what love felt like was amazing. It was an amazing, it was like I said, it's like almost like therapy. Let's talk them down,
Yeah.
And I just, through this whole conversation, we've been talking about putting emotion back and trying to connect into them as people, and that was huge, huge for me. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And to get that young man to listen was, because I'd say I'd put him at, probably about 16, 17 years old. He was a kid that went through a battle that nobody should have to see. So, and I think a lot of these people were, one of the oldest ones, though, is another famous story, was the gentleman who jumped in. I believe he was 75 years old. He was a major patriot. He wanted to fight. He jumped in, put on his top hat and his coat, and got his old weapon, and jumped in with the Union. And he was going to fight. They showed up in his yard, and he jumped in the battle. And all the soldiers were, "Go home, old man. You can't be here." And that man stayed through the whole battle, and he took out his count of enemy too. And he was one of the first men to see the Civil War ghost. About a week after that battle, he was walking down his dirt road to go to his neighbor's house, and he stumbled on one of the young men that was a ghost, and he almost walked right into him, and he backed up quick, and he turned around and went back the other way, and he wrote his accounts down and said he looked as clear to him. He actually thought he was somebody that stayed behind, until he noticed he could see right through him, and it scared him to no end. So there's many walking alongside of the road and try to pick them up thinking that they're reenactors, only to find out that they disappear in thin air. So I tell anybody, if you want to walk the battlefields, walk them with reverence, walk with kindness in your heart, and you're going to see a lot more. You're going to get a lot more out of it. Sit on a rock at Devil's Den. Instead of going to the Sykes Bridge and trying to get them to bang on the side of it, talk to them and tell them, you're still remembered. It's been 150 years, and you're still remembered for what you did here. You're not forgotten. And show them a little kindness, and maybe they'll show you some back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting because I've done two so far. I did, as I said earlier, Ball's Bluff, and I did Manassas a few weeks ago. And it's interesting because I saw a lot of people jogging. They use the battlefields to jog, and I thought that was kind of like, wow, they're here to jog. Do they have any clue of what went on here or whatever? And I was just kind of like a little mystified, like kind of just head scratching, like, wow, there's of course there's people there to see monuments and things like that, but there was an inordinate amount of women, mostly women and a few men, just out there to jog, and it seemed to me like that was their routine, and I was like, wow, I was just thinking to myself, do they really know where they're at?
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I mean, you put it like that. I can't walk on a place like that and not feel. I feel it when I just walk through the woods. I just said it last week. We went somewhere, I can't remember where it was, and we were just looking at the scenery and stuff and how thick the woods were, and I can't get away from those thoughts. You know what I mean? I'll look at. Can you imagine what it was like to be dressed in those wool? If you've ever touched those wool, and I have, the wool uniforms that they wore, I don't know how they did it. And these guys aren't even wearing socks, and they're marching, how many miles a day? They just marched 300 miles, and now they got to jump in over how many days time, and now they got to jump into battle on hardtack and water maybe out of a canteen if they were lucky, or some watered down coffee, or it's just like, I think you'd be hard pressed out of 100 people to find 2 or 3 that could do what those people did.
Absolutely.
Because they're just not built that way anymore.
Yeah.
The intestinal fortitude of the American soldier is still strong. But then, I mean, just think about the Gatling gun. The Gatling was made to end the war. That's why the guy did it. And he just underestimated the intestinal fortitude of the soldier, because they kept coming. And he was horrified by it. They didn't stop. They picked up, they stepped over bodies, and they kept coming. So, I mean, it's absolutely heart-wrenching to think of these people are still walking along the side of the road and, trying to get a ride, or talking to people and handing them tobacco and bullets and showing up. And the different things you learn from it. There's another quick story where there were some people on the campus there by Gettysburg College. And some of the guys had rented a house that was there during the Civil War, to live in. And they were having a party. And they're playing their music and they're talking and everybody's in the living room. Well, the back part of the house was there during the Civil War. The front part that they were in the living room, was an addition that had built on just 20 years before. And the party was mostly there in that front room. And this girl looks up and she sees a man standing in the doorway. And she realizes that he has what looks like could be a Civil War uniform. But some of the young men that were in on the Confederate side didn't have full uniforms. A lot of people did. They came with what they had on their backs, and they didn't have full dress uniforms. And he caught her eye, and he's looking right at her, and she's looking at him, and she's going, "Come on in." He looks so sad. She got this overwhelming sadness from him, and she's waving to him, "Come on in here, join the party." And he just stood there, and he shook his head like he couldn't talk. He didn't say anything to her. But she noticed tears running down his face. Like he wanted to go in with the rest of the people, but for some reason, it was almost like he couldn't step from the older part into the newer part. And the people that she talked to him after that, the guys who lived there, after that, she said, "Yes, we've seen him, but it's always in the older part of the house." And I wonder how ghosts put themselves in their own little box like that. I wonder how that happens.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I've heard that on various occasions. Like some of the books that I've read and talking to people, is that'll happen. Like if they have an addition to the house that wasn't there when these people were there, they tend to not be able to, or whatever, not go to that part of the house. And these people have mentioned that, like, they'll see him over here, but they won't see him over here ever, and they're just kind of like, "Why? I don't understand." And that's interesting because I don't understand that either. Why they wouldn't be able to?
Right, right. And I think it's like I said, is they put themselves almost in their own little thing, like we've talked before, where it's almost like they put them. I don't want to say a box or a cage, but why are they staying in the dark corner of the cellar? Because
Right.
it's there, they don't have to deal with it. Do they get some kind of a torment from the other people that are there? And some ghosts think you're in their home. What do you do?
Yes.
And I wonder how the time bleeds into each other. Like, is it just overlap, at certain times, and they can both see each other, where they're there all the time, and sometimes, they're just hanging out and messing with things that are there, especially in a museum. That they see toys that were there in their time, they recognize them, or books, or whatever, or dress, or uniform, or whatever, and they're drawn to that, or attached to an object or a person. But it's just amazing to me. It's like there's no end to the stories, out of the Civil War, the people that have homes, and you wonder what these ghosts. I just wish that we just sit down and talk to more of them and say, "What do you see? Do you see us? Do you guys get together? Can you communicate between each other?" It seems like they can, and then other times there might be 5 or 6 in a house, and not one of them knows the other one is there. And no matter how much we talk about it, no matter how much we go over the stories and wonder and scratch our heads, I don't think we've even scratched the subject of this wonderful subject of the afterlife and ghosts. Do you, Steve?
Yeah, that's weird. And then you're talking about, houses and things being different. There was a house I used to rent in Oak Ridge where we would hear a door slam in a room where there wasn't a door, other than a sliding glass door. And the owner was there one day doing something. I asked him, so was there ever a door in this room? And he's like, yeah, there where that window is. He said that used to be a door, put a window in, and then put the sliding glass door in. And he kind of looked at me. He said, you hear it slam sometimes, don't you? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, I used to hear that too. He said it didn't do that until after we removed the door and put a window in there. And he said there's times, he said, it would slam so hard it would shake the house, but there's no door there. So whatever was there didn't like it when they changed the house around. And I think that's prevalent in a lot of houses, especially older houses. And when you do start doing renovations or changing things around, it upsets the spirits. They've been there, some of them more than 100 years, and they like it the way it is. Don't mess with it.
Wow. Wow. And yeah, I agree. And I think it also could be, something happened at an emotional time. I know I've slammed doors pretty emotional, and I know that must have dispersed some energy. So I wonder if 50 years from now somebody's going to hear me slamming a door. But you think about that. It's like, and you also think about, sometimes these are things that really get you in the twirl. What if you heard footsteps coming down your steps, right? But what if you're haunting yourself and it was really you 2 weeks ago, and it's just some kind of a time warp or a time flip or something like that? I mean, I think that's possible. I think, like I said, I think that there's so many other things out there, but this is the thing. I'm starting to believe that it's not any one thing. I think it's all connected. If you know what I mean, I think it's all possible. I think it's all true, that all these things can be happening at the same time. It can be an echo from the past, like we said, the cannon fires or something, because we know that inanimate objects, they don't have, a human essence. So how could it be haunting? Well, it's some kind of an imprint, right? But we also know that if ghosts can pass, a powder cartridge or a cigarette sitting in Devil's Den,
Yeah.
that there's something going on there. To the
I
point
think there are living ghosts too. I've told you that story about the guy I knew that went back to visit his childhood home, and the people living there asked him if he ever saw the ghost when he lived there, and he's like, "What ghost?" And they said, "There's a little kid that runs in. We see him running through the house, or he'll go into the bedroom. We go in the bedroom. There's nobody there." And eventually, they described the ghost that they saw, to the point the guy went home and got a picture and brought it back, showed it to him, and they're like, yeah, that's the kid we see here. And it was the guy who had grown up there when he was 5 years old. So somehow, and he said he was traumatized when he had to move from there as a child because he loved that house. But somehow he had imprinted something on there that stayed behind. So, and he wasn't dead and he wasn't 5 years old anymore, but his 5-year-old self was seen running around in this house for years afterwards. Now, how do you explain that?
I can't.
That's one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard of a non-ghost or a living ghost or an impression or whatever you want to call it.
Left a little piece of himself behind. And I wonder if that's not something that we're feeling, that we're drawn, like I was saying earlier, to a certain battlefield or a certain place. I mean, we've all heard the stories of people going out house hunting or dreaming of a house all their life or something like that, and then finding that house, or, you know, going out driving and all of a sudden say, I have to buy that house. I have to have it. The house is almost calling to them. Mm-hmm. And then I've heard stories that went to the next stage where they're drawn to that house. Yes, there's activity there as well. They're having problems. They get somebody in there that's got the right sensitivity and the right gifts to tell them, you're connected to this house. You used to live here in another life. And the house, you know, basically kept calling you, you know, your genetic, your memory, you know. And basically, there's some cases that have gotten so deep that the person wanted to leave and almost like couldn't, and moves just tormented them. They wanted to be there. And I'm wondering if that's not something that we feel with the battlefields. Maybe we fought in those battles.
Yeah. And, you know, I've had that happen. I remember it was the first time I'd ever been up into Ohio. I was just a kid. We were on the way to Michigan to visit aunt and uncle, and this was before the interstates. We were on the old state highways, and there was a little town we went through, and it was just so familiar to me. And I started saying something, and I was like 5 years old. I wasn't quite 6 yet. And I said, yeah, there's a house up here on the right, and then just beyond that there's 3 sheds, and each one's a little more run down than the next. Sure enough, past the house, I'm like, yeah, that house. And then sure enough, around the curve there's the 3 sheds. I had no idea how I knew that, and my parents were just mystified. Of course, my mom kind of understood, but my dad was just like, you know, that's weird, don't do that. But I didn't have any recollection of ever being there or knowing anything about it, but I had seen it before, which was impossible.
Wow. Yeah, that's really something.
There's layers. There's other realities sometimes that kind of bleed through, and I've heard things about DNA memory and things like that, where you're remembering things that your ancestors saw or experienced. And I think there's a lot about the brain and our makeup that we don't understand yet, and may never, depending on how the research goes.
That's absolutely true. And I think through this whole conversation, us reaching back 150 years to that time and trying to understand who they were. I mean, they were just people just like us. And, you know, some of them really didn't have much choice when they come into your town with a carriage load of people trying to get you to join up and sign up. You can't be the last one standing by in your town. There was an honor. And, you know, they were, you know, what else have I got going on? I'm just going to go, this is only going to last a little bit. And 3 years later, these guys just wanted to go home. And they'd seen enough. And I think that the more we talk about it and bring it to the forefront, and the people that are really learning in the paranormal investigation and bringing the heart back to it, maybe we can get some of them home. Because I think that 150 years is long enough. If you guys have, I know we could go on talking forever, and I would do this for another couple hours, but I know you guys got things to do, and I'm so grateful that you took the time tonight to do a little to remember these men and these civilians who went through it. I mean, Jenny Wade and so many of the different people whose lives were turned asunder by that horrible war. I think in these times we have to think about how horrific it is to have a war in your backyard, and how quickly it can start, and how quickly you can wish it never had. And we need to think about how fragile life is, and how long the suffering can go on, because there's still people on those battlefields that are still suffering. So if you guys have anything you'd like to finish with, I would be pleased to listen.
Just basically, thank you for having me on again. This was great, and I'm like you, Cisco. I could go on for hours talking about this, but unfortunately, yes, I do have to have things to do. But I would like to say that this is so enlightening, and it's always a pleasure to talk about these things. And just to give something really quickly, if you would, like I said, if any of your listeners want to talk ghosts, they want to talk treatment, they want to talk anything, they can feel free to reach me at kkillenbt@gmail.com. That's kkillenbt@gmail.com. Also, you can go look for my book, Ghosts and Me, at amazon.com, walmart.com, ozarkmountain.com, and any .com that sells books. I think it'll be there. So again, I implore your audience to read not only my book, but definitely your guys' book, which was just phenomenal. So yeah, pick that up. And again, anytime we can have a discussion like this, it's great, and I've enjoyed this.
Oh, thank you so much, Kevin. Again, your kindness, and Kevin's book, I highly recommend it. It's a great read. It really touches the heart, what it's like to go through these things, what it's like to see them and have them touch you in your personal life, and then try to give back and help them. It's a wonderful read. Steve, all of your books, again, fantastic read. If you like folklore, if you like urban legends, if you like monsters and cryptid and just weird, uncanny things that happen to people, please read My Strange World, Strange Things in the Woods, More Things in the Woods. I almost got that wrong. And listen to 13 Past Midnight. And Steve is just a wonderful storyteller, and I'm proud to call him my friend.
Well, thank you, Cisco. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on, Kevin. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. We'll have to do it again sometime. And
yes, most definitely.
Yeah, likewise. I love to hear stories from people. My email address and all my books, stevestockton81@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at Strange and Odd, and I'm on Facebook. And then Cisco mentioned channel 13 Past Midnight and Missing Persons and Mysteries. So I'm all over the place right now, so I'm easy to find.
And thank you guys so much. And if the listeners take anything again away from this episode, please say a little prayer for the American soldier, and living and dead. We appreciate it, because we can celebrate our freedoms right now, because they gave their last full measure of devotion, so we could do so. So I appreciate you all listening. Thank you, my dear guests. Anytime I'm there for this. And Kevin, if I say anything else to you tonight, if the phone rings, please answer it.
I keep, it's funny because I keep looking over at it, expecting it to, and then thinking it'll happen at 3 a.m.
Yes, it will. And we'll have you back on to tell us about it, my love. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure. And listen, happy Halloween, guys, because here it comes.
It'll be here before you know it.
Yes, absolutely.
About time.
Thank you. Good night, guys.
Good night, everybody. Thanks again.